Advisory Council meeting the year 2024. And I will now turn it over to Stella to take us through the beginning procedure.
Thanks, Len. And hi, everyone. Good to see you all. Happy New Year. My name is Stella Jordan. I'm the Public Engagement Program Manager at the Boston Region MPO, and I'm just going to walk us through a few things to get started with our January 10th, 2024 Regional Transportation Advisory Council meeting. First, our notice of non-discrimination. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. You can read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.bostonmpo.org/mpo_non_discrimination. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact me, Stella Jordan, of MPO staff at sjordan@ctps.org or by calling 857-702-3675. A few guidelines to kick us off. All participants will have joined the meeting with muted microphones. If you haven't done so already, please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. Please do stay on mute unless you're actively speaking, but you may mute and unmute yourself. So to participate in the discussion, you can select the raised hand function, and you can find this by either clicking on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raised hand button at the bottom, or you can find that in the reactions button in the Zoom toolbar, and the chair will call on you. And if you're joining us by phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. If you have any questions or technical difficulties, again, please contact me, Stella Jordan, either via the Zoom chat box, via email at sjordan@ctps.org, or by phone at 857-702-3675. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Len.
Thank you, Stella. And because we have a tight meeting, I may need all the time being available to beg my colleagues for an extra meeting. This month we're going to not do the intros. But if the first time you speak, if you care to introduce yourself, that would be great. But right now we'll start with seeing if there are any public comments.
So far we know.
AC for Prosa.
No, just since we're not doing intros, just to know, I'm gonna hop off around 3:45. I have to leave.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for letting us know. If there's anything you want us to deal with, before you need to go, just let us know, okay? If we need to rearrange things, we will. All right. Okay. Anyone else? I don't see anything else. Any other hands up? You can raise your hand. Oh, electronically, that'd be great. Josh Asroff.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this has been my last meeting at the RTAC as an employee of the city of Newton. I'm moving on in a couple of weeks. I'll actually be on staff at the MBTA. I'm really pleased to say that, but it's been great working with folks here on matters related to Newton. The MPO is an amazing regional partner, and I do appreciate that. But here today to talk about items under your consideration, including microtransit. And I know Nicole will continue on in a consulting, part-time limited consulting capacity, and as the originator of NUMO is, super well equipped to do that. But we use your time judiciously.
Well, thanks for letting us know that, Josh. We'll have you back, in capacity, as an employee of MBTA. I suspect, and I remember, I think the first time you were with us was as a employee of transportation from Massachusetts, from Mass.
Could have been, yep.
Well, it's good to see that you're staying around.
Can't hold a steady job, but whatever.
It's all transportation related, so
that's right.
right?
Thank you.
So okay, well, thanks, Eden. And so all right, I don't see any other hands up. And so at this point, we'll move on to the project universe for fiscal years 2025-29 of the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program, with Ethan LaPointe, the TIP manager. Ethan?
Thanks, everybody. My name is Ethan LaPointe. I'm the Transportation Improvement Program Manager, as Len just mentioned. So the original purpose of today's presentation was to provide you with an update on the TIP universe of projects, which really is a running tracker that we use at the MPO to keep tabs on what projects might eventually be trying to receive federal funding. If we can go on to the next slide, we can look at a presentation overview, but the reason why I said originally was because that since this presentation was originally provided to the MPO board in December, and now that we are in the new year, we also have a idea on what projects have actually moved to seek funding through the federal fiscal years 2025 to 29 TIP. While this presentation will not cover those projects specifically, we will provide some information on exactly how many projects we are actually seeing looking for federal funding and a very high-level overview on the trends we're seeing in these applications. Of course, the universe of projects is a working document that is constructed with each iteration of the TIP. So we'll start off with a review on exactly what was funded in the current federal fiscal years 2024 to 28 TIP, an overview on a project development process, which what this really means is how does a project get this funding, a summary on what is in the universe of projects this year, in addition to that mention I made on some of the projects that are looking for funding, next steps as far as what the universe means, and then discussion. This is a different presentation to what will follow this, which is on microtransit in a more broad sense, but it's related in a way. So with that, if we can go on to the next slide, I'll just start with a review of the fiscals 24 to 28 TIP. So on that next slide, as some of you may remember from around this time last year when we were discussing the development of the 24-28 TIP, that TIP has allocated $150.2 million of new funding to 21 new projects in that TIP. 10 of those 21 projects were within the Community Connections program at the MPO. And the reason why we break those out is because Community Connections represents about 2% of overall funding. And 3 were in the Transit Transformation Program, formerly the Transit Modernization Program. We broke those out because that was a new classification that year, and also because each of those 3 were selected because they came from the MBTA after the project application period had closed. That was compared to 23 projects that were evaluated in the federal fiscal years 23 to 27 TIP and 10 in the prior TIP for 2022 to 26. Overall, the current TIP, when you include not only the new projects that were added and the ones that were already there, has 58 total projects that are funded by the MPO with $697.5 million in total funding, which is allocated not only to those projects, but a small amount of it is also kept in reserve for things like cost overruns and also to accommodate those new projects that might come in. In the 24-28 TIP, we also made some strategic decisions that included the implementation of a dedicated bike share support program in order to support the current Blue Bike system for state of good repair and expansion needs, and also to enable more communities to engage with it. And this is a main driver for today's discussion, the Project Design Pilot Program in federal fiscal years 2025 to provide capital fund, or I should say, federal funding support to municipalities to design projects that may eventually apply for construction funding on the TIP. The reason for this was to improve the project application pipeline, which if we go to the next slide, I actually have a new graphic here, which was not presented to the board in December because we didn't have this information then, shows why we are trying to improve the project application pipeline. So on screen here, there are 3 different color bars. The important bar to monitor is that blue one. In the 2019 to 23 TIP, because again, we update the TIP every year, so this wasn't that many years ago, really, we saw around 25 projects that were being evaluated per year. Those 25 projects were in the core investment programs at the MPO, the investment programs that really represented the bulk of all of the dollar amounts that come through in things like complete streets. For each year since then, there has been a decline in the total volume of applications received across those investment programs. Going down very briefly, this was in calendar year 2019, in the 2020 to 24 TIP to about 24 projects. Then when COVID hit, and with that first year of COVID project development, down to around 17 projects. Also with the advent, though, of the Community Connections program itself bringing in 7 projects there, so it looked like 24. And as you look at these other orange bars on the screen here, namely the lighter orange, you can see those Community Connections projects, which have remained relatively steady. But for each year until this year, 2025 to 29, it has been a marked decline. In the 2025 to 29 tip, for all non-Community Connections investment programs, we have received 3 projects that are looking for construction and implementation funding. We have received around 8 projects right now. I believe it might be 9. I need to verify that. I think it's 9 for the Community Connections program. And critically, the project design pilot, which is a separate $4 million only bucket of funding, has received applications for 15 projects. These are, however, design only, and the requests here from these 15 projects are going against $4 million of available funding when the current requested amount is about $18 million, which far exceeds the available funding to go around there. So the bottom line of what this graph is trying to convey is that we have seen a stark decline in overall project applications for the investment programs that represent the majority of funding at the MPO. We are taking steps to try to mitigate that, but the 2025 to 29 tip development cycle is no different. It is a continuation of this trend. So with that, we can kind of start to explain the why we're seeing this happen. And really, one of the reasons is the project life cycle. If we go on to the next slide and the one after that, getting a project selected for federal funding on the tip can be difficult. For one, there are 2 concurrent and really kind of parallel processes that may happen if a community wants to go for MPO regional prioritization to fund a project for construction. A project can really begin in one of 2 locations, but they often relate to one another. You can either speak to your local highway district staff, of which there are 4 in the Boston region, districts 3, 4, 5, and 6, depending on which of the 97 communities you live in, or go to MPO staff directly. Wherever you start your conversation to advance your project, one party is inevitably going to talk to the other, and then that parallel process begins. Every project, however, must engage with the left side of the screen, which is the MassDOT project development. Namely, that first step there, project initiation, and eventually the scoping of the project, defining what the boundaries and what kinds of improvements may be done within the project that would be funded under federal funds. When a project has completed its first initiation stage or even that conversation, the MPO then adds it to the universe of projects as a tracking item. The universe of projects and your incorporation in it isn't a prerequisite to receive funding in the way that, say, initiation or project review committee approval is. It's just the way that the MPO keeps tabs on the totality of the ideas and needs that the region may have for transportation investments. Project review committee approval at MassDOT, that item there in the red box on the left, is the earliest threshold where, once met, a project could begin seeking federal funding. And we'll show that in brief on the next slide. Once a project is at PRC approval, or preferably at 25% design, MPO staff may, after an application by the municipality, evaluate it with our tip criteria, and then eventually, with scores in hand, make a programming recommendation to the MPO to say, here are the projects we want to fund. Even after a project is selected for funding on the tip, it will still need to continue its design process until it reaches 100% design and then plans, specifications, and estimates so that it can enter construction. At that point, once it's in construction, it usually exits the tip because it's already underway. So with that, if we can go on the next slide, here's the takeaways of that graphic because that was a lot of information. Go on the next slide, please. Oh, sorry, there's transitions. That's my mistake. Perfect. So to kind of give a high-level overview, there are 3 main milestones that communities need to look for. First off, initiation and scoping. This is the earliest stage where you start getting the paperwork done here for a lot of projects. This often happens before any significant design thresholds have taken place. The majority of projects that you will see under the design pilot in later discussions throughout this year will be ones at this stage. This is where most of the projects that are looking for the design pilot have begun. However, some of these projects have reached the second stage, and these are the project review committee approval projects. It's still a pretty early stage, but it is that initial go-ahead to start working towards federal funding, and it does, in the long run, unlock the ability to apply for construction funds. But because it is still an early stage, there is more risk associated with funding a project, or rather, I should say more uncertainty associated, that is only at that project review committee stage of approval. The preferred alternative, based on what the MPO has adopted in terms of its 2021 TIP cost change committee, is a 25% design threshold for funding, which is where key design elements and permits are either in place or underway, and the scope of work is mostly defined. These are where the superior TIP candidates come in. We can go on to the next slide. We can start actually talking about what this means in terms of the TIP universe. So I'll start running through some numbers real quickly here, just to give you a very high-level overview on what is going on here. First off, the TIP universe is a working document. It is the TIP universe that was presented for fiscal 24 to 28, minus the projects that were programmed and those that were deactivated. A deactivated project is not a canceled project. A deactivated project is a project that was added to the universe, but is no longer a priority for that municipality, or it hasn't had a lot of activity on it in some years. It can still come back in the future. And then we refine that project list of what is left through correspondence with municipalities, meetings with MAPC, sub-regional groups, and of course, feedback from MassDOT Highways district offices. What this culminates in on the next slide is a table that looks like a lot of information, and it is, but here's the bottom line. The universe of projects has 143 project line items in it. About 1/3 of those are coming out of the inner core, but the remaining 2/3 are coming from the other communities within the greater Boston region. And as we go on to future slides, I'll actually break down what we're really seeing happening here. This is up, I will say, because we have a takeaways at the end. This is up from 105 last year. So the universe is much bigger than it was last year by a significant extent, while the applications are much lower. So on the next slide, we'll start talking about the inner core. So growth in that to get from 105 to about 143 is well distributed across subregions. The inner core grew a modest amount, really, from 37 to 46 projects in terms of relative number of communities and all the projects they're working on. One of the common things here is that a lot of these communities are well experienced with navigating the MassDOT process because they are larger communities. Almost all projects that were here were already initiated with MassDOT or were already at a stage of project review committee approval. One of the other things that really enabled this were congressional earmarks that have recently been added back in under the federal bipartisan infrastructure law. A lot of those 9 new projects in the inner core came from bicycle and pedestrian projects, many of which, like in Arlington for the Mystic River Path or in Brookline for the Beacon Street Bridle Pathways, were enabled thanks to design earmarks. Arlington, Belmont, Boston, Brookline, Cambridge, Milton, and Newton all have new projects, and all of those projects were already at a PRC level of approval. I can say as well right now that none of those projects applied for funding this year as they are still in design, but this helps to indicate that there already is a good amount of momentum building in inner core communities. So if we go on to the next slide, we can start talking about some of our more suburban communities and what they're seeing. The Minuteman Advisory Group and the Magic the so-called Magic subregion, which is the Minuteman Advisory Group, Lexington, Concord, Acton, and those neighboring communities, and then the Metro West Regional Council, which Framingham, Natick, and its neighboring communities, were where we saw the greatest amount of growth. So at the beginning of the TIP development cycle, Magic and Metro West each had 7 projects in their region. That grew to 15 projects in Magic and 10 in Metro West. And unlike many other subregions, this growth was very well distributed, meaning it's not that one municipality had 4 projects they added. In many cases, especially in the design pilot, multiple municipalities from these subregions came forward and said, we have 1 or 2 priority projects we really want to advance. The design pilot is really being used by these communities to not only do complete streets projects, but also bike and ped projects. It's a very well-rounded distribution of project types, and they're also beginning to look further at community connections projects, and it's a key growth area for our transit transformation projects and working with regional transit authority partners. There's a lot of potential here. There are also a fair number of projects in the design pilot side that are coming out of these communities, more so than the other subregions. We also have some subregions on the next slide that have historically been well engaged in terms of the TIP universe and TIP applications. This is the North Suburban Planning Council and the North Shore Task Force, the northern suburbs of the Boston region. Historically, they've done pretty well in getting projects on the TIP and staying involved in the MassDOT process. Northern suburbs increased from 8 to 10 projects in the universe, and the North Shore Task Force had a good amount of improvement from 13 to 18. There's not a lot of concern here. Obviously, getting these projects moving along is important. Many of these projects were focusing on vulnerable user safety and climate adaptation, but there was no decline here, and they're well acclimated and well represented in terms of TIP investments. So solid growth, nothing really too much of a deviation from previous years. One of the areas where we're kind of seeing some difficulty is on the next slide, and this is in the southwestern subregions of the MPO. So we're still seeing growth here, but the growth is really concentrated to select communities. The Southwest communities, the ones that may say border Rhode Island, for example, like Bellingham, Wrentham, Norfolk, they increased from 16 to 23 projects. That is a sizable amount of projects for one subregion, but one of the issues being that many of the projects in the SWAP subregion did not necessarily advance well past where they were last year. So it's a bit of a bottleneck going on. The Trick subregion, the Three Rivers, things like Westwood, Canton, Milton, for example, and others in the Neponset River area, they saw some growth as well from 11 to 14, but part of that was also driven by the fact that one large project was broken up into a couple smaller projects. So again, not really that much growth either. What we are seeing is positive. We're seeing a lot of interest in complete streets, especially thanks to the MBTA Communities Law, but only 4 communities are accounting for all the growth that you're seeing on screen really here of those 10 new projects. So 4 communities, 10 projects. There's about 20 projects total between these 2 different subregions. The main barrier here is not just project initiation and getting these moving forward, but also getting them designed. The design funding is that big bottleneck. And the last community, which we are trying to do more to keep an eye on here, because I'm almost at the end, is the South Shore Coalition. As the name implies, these are our South Shore communities. This is an increase from 6 to 7 on the TIP universe. The only new project was the addition of a Nantasket Avenue redesign project in Hull that is currently trying to move forward. Engagement with these communities has been difficult. We know that there's a lot of need down there, but they are also very resource constrained, not only in financials, but also in staff capacity to move these projects. There are major resilience and trail gap concerns, not only from the MPO and partners at MAPC, but also from local advocates. And we know the planning staff are trying to move these projects forward. So hopefully we will be able to do more here in the future. But this year, this is an area where we want to see more growth as we do future TIP development cycles. So with that, key takeaways before we go into discussion and questions. Again, this is 143 projects, up from 105 last year. The real reason for this was the project design pilot. It is a little bit less gatekeeping in terms of listing projects in the TIP universe. More conceptual projects can be added into the TIP. Same with transit transformation and also community connections. What these figures really represent isn't a huge growth in desires so much as what we're really willing to show. And I think the bottom line is there's a high interest in advancing more projects. A growing project universe is a good way of illustrating that we are trying to open back up the project pipeline, and we're hoping that the project design pilot is really going to help move these things along. So with that, I know that was a lot of information somewhat quickly. If we go on the next slide, I just have one that says discussion if folks have questions.
And we are 2 minutes behind schedule, and I think we have a pretty weighty topic coming next. So we're going to take 1 or 2 questions. Josh.
Thank you so much. Ethan, I just really appreciate how thorough you are in your outreach and solicitation of project ideas. For a community to submit something for the upcoming TIP, how timely is it to get PRC approval? And what does it mean if a project is like funded for design, but the design is not complete?
So one of the things that for the PRC approval question, the application period was November 1st to December 31st. So most of the projects that were getting PRC approval did so at the quarterly meeting, either in the summer or the one that happened around, I want to say November, December in there. For those that might be coming in as a fill-in project, given we only got 3 applications this year, that is still up in the air because I believe the spring PRC, and I don't want to put him on the spot, but I think Ben Muller from D6 is here. I think the spring PRC might still be discussed because it might conflict with MassDOT's TIP development scheduling. So that still needs to be worked out, but we are keeping an eye on that for any projects that might try to come and fill in.
Yeah, I would reach out to Ben, or he might know now, but we can do that separately.
Yeah, we could. And then with regard to your question for design funding, many of the projects that are seeking design funding as a requirement do not yet have other sources of design identified and have not yet started design. Because we are using federal funds for this, we can't support already ongoing design activities unless those design activities are themselves federally funded.
Yeah, I don't think I asked my question correctly. We have projects that are fully funded locally for design. The design has just not been completed. Does that disqualify from applying for construction only funding?
So long as they get project review committee approval, they are fine. Most of the projects that are on the tip right now do not yet have a very mature design, or I should say, do not yet have a level of design that is beyond 25%.
Sounds great. Okay, I appreciate that, Ethan, and Ben will follow up. Thanks.
Sure. I mean, if Ben wants to say something now, he can, but he doesn't have to. All right. And John?
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks, Ethan. That was a good overview. Question similar to Josh's. For the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Phase 3, we're edging up on, let's say, our draft of the 25%, which we might even have that first draft today. But we're looking to submit it probably in May, April, May. Where would that put us if we were to? I know Marcia Rasmussen's going to be leading the charge on that for us in Sudbury. But would that put us into applying in 24 or in 20? Would it have to be pushed off to 25?
So if the project is currently on, we can talk about this more offline.
Yeah,
probably in a meeting with Sudbury. But
yeah,
generally speaking, if the project is going to be at 25% design by,
right,
let's say, October of this year,
yes,
for purposes of tip development, we would consider it at 25, so long as it's on a good tack for it.
okay.
So we can discuss more offline about that. But
yeah, it'd definitely be before October, and we're going to have the same design firm as we used with 2D, as will Framingham. So we have some experience. We can move it ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Ethan. And I'm just going to read out what Ben said, just because someone may be watching this meeting and they'll get the information verbally, whereas we can get it from the chat. So Ben says the next PRC is scheduled for May 23rd. So it's a little late for this current tip development cycle. And with that, Ethan, we move on to microtransit discussion.
yes, so thank you, everybody. This is, as Len warned, going to be a little bit of a heavier topic, and we're actually joined as well today by Jim Nee, who's the administrator for the Metro West RTA. We'll let introduce himself once we do a quick handoff midway through, but we'll also be taking some pauses through the discussion in case folks have questions here. So just to start off with an agenda, go on to the next slide. We'll do a quick refresher on exactly what the microtransit pilot program is that the MPO is funding before we do a handoff to Jim, so that way he can discuss a project that the MPO is funding part of right now, which is Metro West RTA's Catch Connect microtransit service and the experience that he's had there. So there's other folks on this call as well who in the discussion period are welcome to provide some of their experience. And then we'll kind of go into some of the consistent challenges we've seen in recent years, really to kind of just do a little bit of a debrief and say, like, we've been doing microtransit funding for around 4 to 5 years now at the MPO. There have been pilots before that. What are some of the things that a lot of our communities are running into as they try to do this for themselves? That informs how the strategy around the broader program. And of course, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A and discussion there. So starting off with some background on the pilot, if we could jump 2 slides. So the Community Connections Program funds microtransit pilots for the Boston Region MPO. The reason that this happens is the Community Connections Program focuses on first and last mile connectivity. Microtransit is funded in addition to bike share, bike parking, and lanes. And it began in this current iteration, I should say, in the federal fiscal years 21 to 25 TIP, building off of a former program, which was the Workforce Transportation Grant Program from federal fiscal year 2020. This was funded with $2.5 million a year in the program, and it utilizes a special kind of funding, which is congestion mitigation and air quality funding. It is federal funding, and that is important because this funding has a lot of requirements that need to be met for project eligibility, namely providing an air quality benefit and improving the environment. And that's very important in terms of actually quantifying the extent to which the transit service acts as a substitute for a single occupancy vehicle trip in terms of emissions reduction. Microtransit has been long popular as a solution to resolving first and last mile gaps, not only within the Boston region, but really nationwide. This isn't the first time this kind of activity has been done. It was actually gaining momentum before COVID, and there have been other microtransit pilots feeding into it. The reason why microtransit was funded, if we can go on to the next slide, as I mentioned, was a build-off of a workforce transportation grant program in federal fiscal year 2020. A lot of the analysis that communities currently funded under this program did. I'm not saying this because of the two examples on screen here. These are just examples that we've talked about. But for other communities not represented here, a lot of their analysis was done for workforce transportation before COVID. As many can probably surmise, those kinds of demand numbers that may have been done before COVID for workforce transportation were heavily impacted by changes in office commuting patterns during and after COVID. One of the other items here that's worth considering is that we do not operate in a vacuum at the MPO. We are just one funding source. Many communities may rely on things like what MassDOT offers with their federal Section 5310 funding, which are the community transit grants, which we'll also actually be discussing at next week's MPO board meeting on the 18th for new awards there for fiscal 24. And again, this isn't the first time a pilot has been done. Many pilot concepts have been done for decades, not only by the Boston Region MPO, the 2010s and the early 2000s, but also other entities as well, including a new Transit Innovation Grant Program, which is currently open now for applications, closing on the 19th. So, if we go on the next slide, we have funded at the Boston Region MPO 7 distinct operations for microtransit, many of these across different line items. If really here, I'll just say their names in full because the next slide kind of gives a status update on where they're at. But this includes in Canton, the Royal Street Fixed Route Workforce Shuttle. The Cape Ann Transportation Authority applied to get funding for an on-demand microtransit service. Newton has their Newton in Motion microtransit service, which was funded across 5 years. The Montechusett Regional Transit Authority also has an on-demand service that is just starting up, funded between 23 and 25. MWRTA, who we will be hearing from, has 23 to 26 for their Catch Connect service in Framingham, Natick, Marlborough, Hudson, and elsewhere. Those 4 communities are just the ones that the MPO is currently funding. They also have service in Wellesley. And also in Stoneham, a fixed route east to west shuttle service, and Watertown, a fixed route Pleasant Street service for connecting their Pleasant Street neighborhoods into Harvard Square as well in Cambridge. So the situation update for each of these before we kind of do a deeper dive on Metro West RTA's Catch Connect is, on the next slide, that many of the shuttles that the MPO has funded are struggling to actually try to indicate that after the 3-year pilot period is done, that they could continue to operate. This graph on screen here, or I should say this graphic on screen here, is color coded to sort of indicate the potential with which a project will be able to continue in year 4 without MPO financial assistance. There are 3 line items here, the Catch Connect microtransit service in Marlborough and Hudson, and in Natick and Framingham, which are showing strong potential for continuation, not necessarily a guarantee, and also Newton's microtransit service. One of the issues that has appeared for a couple of these, like the Cape Ann Transportation Authority one, Montechusett RTA, and Stoneham, is some procurement issues that have come forth where getting these services underway and actually getting the data to figure out how well they are doing has taken some time, especially post-COVID, getting the vehicles, getting the staff to get ready. And in some cases, like the Royal Street Shuttle in Canton, there's been difficulty not only meeting performance metrics, but also difficulty demonstrating progress towards those performance metrics. In that case, where ridership numbers last year are the same as this year, roughly, and not necessarily indicating that they may continue without the MPO. Again, these are just examples. They're not indicative of all cases, and there's also no guarantee whether or not any of these will continue, but this is what we're seeing at a very high level. So for example of a regional transit authority and microtransit service that is seeing a good amount of growth and performance, especially in recent months. If we go on to the next slide, I actually wanted to pass it over and hopefully not putting them on the spot too much here, to Jim Nee from MWRTA to talk about Catch Connect.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ethan. I actually have a short slide deck. I'd be happy to share my screen if that's possible. Let's see. Can you all see my screen? Awesome. So this brief presentation is about microtransit here at the Metro West RTA. Our version of microtransit is called Catch Connect, as Ethan said. This introductory slide here is just sort of a few images of our vehicle, our logos. The images on the left and right are images of what the app interface looks like. Our app was actually developed by a third-party contractor who works for us almost exclusively on IT consulting. So we really had the opportunity to develop a great portion of the application we were using in-house, as well as we do our own maintenance, and we have an operations provider in-house that we use for providing this service. So while many of these services are contracted out, the services are contracted out with known vendors already under contract that we work with on a number of projects. So that was definitely a benefit to the MWRTA. So a few of our operational targets, generally speaking, we're really targeting less than $70 per hour, per revenue hour on the service. To put that in perspective, per revenue hour on many bus or van modes, you can really see anywhere between about 65 to 70 on the low end. And on certain types of buses, you could easily see 150 plus per revenue hour. With that, we're really targeting a cost per trip. UPT is just unlinked passenger trip, so a cost per passenger who rides the vehicle. We're really targeting less than $20 per trip, and that would be somewhat competitive with an Uber or Lyft ride. So if the RTA can get the total cost of that trip, whether the person pays that cost or the RTA is paying that cost, if we can get that cost below that, then it sort of shows the value of providing this service, since in many respects, microtransit is similar to Uber and Lyft. So we want to be at that level or better if possible. In order to get there, we really do need to get to about 3.5 trips per hour or per revenue hour. And we're targeting 4 because we would love to exceed that. It does seem like exceeding 4 is possible in limited circumstances. But for a mode type, microtransit, I think, is going to have a really hard time getting much above 4. That's our experience so far. There might be other programs throughout the country or throughout the Commonwealth that can exceed that easily, though with our program, we've seen that as somewhat difficult. So this number, though, 3.5 to 4, is interesting because in our other demand response models, not fixed routes, but demand response, our target benchmark is right around 2 per hour. So that's pretty standard in the industry. If you hit 2 passengers per hour in demand response, you're doing quite well. That's on ADA services, dial-a-ride services for the elderly. So this is per trip can be quite a bit more effective than traditional demand response. And I think that's why the MWRTA has seen this be successful, is because there's that overlap in the services that we provide. And within this region, we have an entire universe of riders. And if a rider goes from one mode, say a demand response or ADA trip, and they say, well, I want the convenience of microtransit, and they move over to a microtransit trip, they get the convenience of the microtransit trip, and we would experience the savings on average. So that operational target, I think, is really important for us. And it's not unique to the MWRTA, but I think it is unique to certain public transit providers. We're obviously targeting average wait times of hopefully less than 15 minutes. That's really for good customer service and for adoption of the system. Our technical on-time metric is not having a wait of more than 30 minutes. So that's how we actually measure our technical on-time performance. But we've seen that when it's 15 minutes or less, it's typically very well received by passengers, and that then increases ridership, increases adoption. It really does well when it's sort of at that number. We do track, but we don't actually have an internal operations target on cost per unique rider. We know that cost is important for CMAQ and for the MPO. So we do track it. We haven't really figured out, though, what the right number is for that. So we definitely have some challenges. We've seen that in startup of any microtransit project. You really need extensive marketing to establish organic growth. It is really hard to get the word out there. And the people who might be inclined to use your service, they may already be on an ADA demand response. They may already be using Uber and Lyft. They may be using a bus, or they may be driving their car and they're not really thinking that public transit is the right mode for them, even if it's very convenient and perfect for them. So that startup marketing is really important. And even with the best of the best on startup marketing, it is challenging to get that organic growth, and it takes some time. And we've had some pretty successful pilots so far, and we're talking months, if not years, to establish that organic growth. Definitely at least 6 to 12 months before you really start hitting operational targets. Interesting, in most transportation modes, trip generators, places where a lot of people want to go to or from, they're almost always positive. In microtransit, though, it can be both positive and negative. We want that ridership. We want people riding, and we want to help people get to where they need to go. But if there's too much ridership, if it's too condensed, that high demand, and demand is obviously relative, that can be difficult to deal with when you're talking about an on-demand service. It's not like a bus or a train that has capacity to hold 100 people, 200, 500 people. There's very limited capacity in these types of vehicles. And if people aren't going to the exact same location, high demand from one location can sort of, I don't want to say it can cripple the system, but it can slow it down and bog it down. So both trip generators are both good and bad. It's a double-edged sword for sure. We have found, and this is for the MWRTA, I'm not going to speak to any other program. For us, we find that it's a bit of a Goldilocks service, where if an area lacks density, it results in increased trip length, trip wait times, and really just reduced operational efficiency on that sort of cost per trip basis. And if there's too much density, it results in increased wait time, reduced operational efficiency, and poor customer satisfaction because of long wait times. So it's interesting. If you have too few people, sort of it doesn't work too well. And if you have too many people, it doesn't work too well. And there's other transportation modes that can work on those sort of bookends of it. But in certain Goldilocks situations, microtransit can be very effective. But again, in limited scenarios, we're finding. We find that for our particular service area, the areas that for us feel kind of more suburban, they're not quite too rural, they're not quite too dense, those are sort of the best places. And I have an example of one of our fixed routes that we operate that I'd love to show at the very end of this. But what we have found through our data, since we're not just evaluating microtransit, we're also looking at fixed route and other demand response services, is that this sort of falls in between. And when demand response, typical ADA or dial-a-ride programs, it's just not quite enough, but a fixed route doesn't work either because it wouldn't be effective, then microtransit may be that solution in the middle. As I said, another lesson learned is really need extensive marketing to get the word out there. And for us, we consider it a tool on the tool belt. It's not the only tool. I think public agencies like an RTA or any other transportation agency, they're really well suited because of how we're subsidized by state and federal funds. And we can kind of use funding, whether it's for, I have a maintenance facility here for my buses. So when I need maintenance on my vehicles or the cost of that maintenance, it's not quite the same level of variable cost that it might be for a private provider who has to provide specific maintenance costs and specific things for this specific program that would be contracted out. There's a benefit we get from already doing all these things in-house that some others might not enjoy. And also, I think the end result of microtransit in sort of the short, medium, and long term, is that it's not only a tool for the operational effect, it not only helps people get to and where they need to go in certain circumstances, but even in the ones that aren't successful, and especially in the ones that are, it needs to be viewed as a planning tool. Often we'll have studies in public transportation where people tell you, this is where I want to go and this is where I want to go to on public transit. And the people who respond tell you where they want to go to and from. And then they never ride a service that goes to and from there that's available in public transit, or they ride from a different location, or the demand just doesn't necessarily match the study. But with this information, we know exactly where people who are willing to try public transportation want to go to and from if they can define what their to and their from is. So that data, I think, is very valuable. And we're using that here at the MWRTA to make sure that even in a case where a pilot may not be continued long-term, at the very least, we're going to learn what we should be doing on our other demand response programs and what we should be doing on our fixed route programs. So at the very least, we had an effective planning tool from the program. So what I wanted to share on the Route 1 microtransit data, on the left here, you have our Route 1 that, as it's been constructed for a number of years, for the most part, it runs east to west on Route 9. In the east, it connects to the Woodland MBTA Green Line station, and in the west, it connects with the Natick Mall. Because Route 9 is obviously Route 9, there's a fair bit of traffic. So Route 9 isn't really an express route for us for most of that route. So using Route 9 as the main east-west, it doesn't increase sort of operational efficiency on time in most cases. And we were actually finding that through the community of Wellesley, we were getting very low ridership along Route 9. And that was because it's just not a good place for picking up and dropping off people. There's not really good places for bus stops. So the bus sort of went express through there, but it didn't actually do it at an express miles per hour. And what you see on the right here is just a kind of basic outline of where we were seeing some of our highest concentration of trips for our Wellesley Catch Connect program. And while that's not one of the ones that the MPO funded, I think it's relevant to bring that up here as a planning tool. We saw that from the Woodland station, one of the places we were already serving, a key terminus, there 2/3 of our trips in the Wellesley community went either between the Woodland station down towards Mass Bay and Babson College, or at some location in between. So if 2/3 of the trips are between these two areas, this is just data that, you know, we wouldn't have gotten from the fixed route here on the left because there was no connection directly down to Babson on the fixed route. So we didn't know what the public transportation demand was there. So what we were able to do over the last year was make a modification with very minimal impact on the total travel time. While this as a map looks like, oh, it's quite the deviation down to 135 in Wellesley rather than staying on Route 9. This is measured in several minutes of additional travel time overall. And it's been, I think, a wonderful success for our Route 1. So we've seen a transition of a number of Catch Connect microtransit riders from the microtransit program over to the fixed route. So it's improved the operational efficiency of our Route 1 fixed route service because now we had this demand that was discovered from microtransit. We were able to do route planning based on that demand. And now the limited resources for microtransit in Wellesley are more freed up to provide more effective service in Wellesley because now, while not everyone is riding on the Route 1 between Babson and Woodland, enough of them are that it's decreased the demand on that program. So that was one of the planning examples and how important we found the data to be for the microtransit program. But again, what I reiterate is this is specifically, my comments are really for public transit providers, especially like RTAs, the experiences in particular for the Metro West here. There are definitely benefits and costs of microtransit. And it really, what we've found is it kind of needs to be in that middle zone. If it's too sparse, if it's too rural, then standard kind of old-fashioned demand response services where they're pre-scheduled trips, maybe you call the day before, might make more sense. And if you don't do it that way, your cost per trip is going to go through the roof. And then if it gets too dense, then you really should be running a fixed route or maybe amending a currently existing fixed route. Because if it's too dense, a single van running around to try to pick up all those people just can't do it. And you'll just create dissatisfied riders and your tools just won't be used effectively. So that's my presentation on microtransit with the MWRTA. I am always happy to take questions.
Thank you. Are we going back to Ethan? Or we're going to do the Q&A discussion at this point?
If folks have questions, they're welcome to ask.
Okay. Well, I did have two questions, but you, Mr. Nee, answered it at the very end. And so now I'll just wait until the very end. Hopefully I'll have a chance to ask my second question. So I'll turn to the attendees, Franny, and then
Yeah.
AC.
Through this testing of finding out information about needs, were you able to reach out to partners? Like, for example, the college that was served, were you able to reach out to them? And did it affect like any financial participation by partners?
So we've reached out to a number of partners. We have a number of public-public partnerships and public-private partnerships. Some of those are for commuter shuttles that we operate, and we're establishing a few partnerships related to microtransit. There's obviously some hesitation whenever you go to a public-private partnership or try to establish one, wondering, how long will that be for and how much is the financial commitment for and what's fair. That can be sometimes hard to establish. And with microtransit being so new compared to fixed route, we're still kind of developing that, but we've had extensive conversations with other parties and other potential stakeholders. Like the example there was Babson College. We've met with Babson a number of times to discuss this and to see, where can we partner more and can there be some sort of formalized agreement? I would anticipate that relationship would be formalized over the next several years, but at this point, that one hasn't been. But we have others with certain employers. MathWorks in Natick is a great example. They've partnered on certain commuter shuttles.
Thanks. So AC has put her hand down. So
well, it was pretty much in line with what Franny just asked. I wanted to know about if they were thinking about hub to hub rather than like it being an Uber or Lyft. But it was kind of the same thing, so it just got answered.
Okay, great. So I don't see any other hands. So I'm going to ask one question of Mr. Nee, and then one that will be for Josh, and Ethan. And maybe this is for Josh and for Ethan too. So the demand. Who's using the service? And what were they doing? When the service wasn't available, either before the service became available or in cases where they wanted to use it but it wasn't available. Like it currently exists, but for whatever reason the van isn't available.
Sure. So it depends on which pilot we're talking about, and I can tell you that each one of them kind of has their own answer to that question, and they're all unique, but I think they're all important to hear. So one of our pilots is in Framingham and Natick on Saturdays and Sundays. It's a joint service area, Saturdays and Sundays, it's about a 12-hour service period. And what we've seen there is there's a number of people who are using it to go shopping who on Sundays, we have no fixed route service, though a little plug, Metro West is starting our fixed route service on February 4th of this year. We'll actually be running fixed route service on Sundays. But there was previously no fixed route service on Sunday. So on Sunday, a member of the general public had no public transportation option outside of if they were going to get on the commuter rail to go to Boston. So this was a new option for people, and we saw a number of people who went shopping or to other areas like that. On Saturday, we saw some people moving from fixed route onto this. But what we really saw a lot of on the Framingham Natick is our ADA clientele. We saw a huge number of them who said, this is sometimes more convenient. When I have free time and when I'm not bound to either a work schedule or something else like that, I kind of just want to be spontaneous, like a person might be in a car. But when you're doing demand response services via ADA, there's requirements on booking 1-2 days in advance. Now they can have an app, and on a Saturday or Sunday, they can just say, hey, I want to go there at this time. And 15 minutes later, 20 minutes later, there's a vehicle picking them up. So for the Framingham and Natick example, we saw huge upticks from our ADA community, using this service. And we love to see that because those are people who might not have access to other transportation. There's transportation dependent people, and then there's very transportation dependent people. And many of these people would have no other access. In the Wellesley example, we've seen kind of a mix. We have a lot of density coming out of the higher ed institutions, both Mass Bay and Babson. So we're getting some really great operational metrics out of there, but we're also seeing a number of people in the ADA community as well, and people for whom the fixed route, the Route 1, for example, that just doesn't go by their house. Wellesley's kind of it's not a huge community, but there's other areas that aren't served by the Route 1. And if they feel like it's too far of a walk, a mile, half a mile, then maybe it might make sense for them to call up a Catch Connect and get that ride that way instead. So we're seeing mixed use by just normal transit riders, people who might be on a demand response service, and then some concentration from higher ed there in Wellesley. The demographic breakdown and what we're seeing up in the Hudson Marlboro pilot, which we've been running for several months now, I don't think there's an established pattern well enough. We're still sort of in the organic growth ramp up phase. So I think it'd be premature for me to comment on that one. The next pilot that we're starting, which is the same service area as Saturday and Sunday, Framingham and Natick, but we're going to be piloting that at nights in Framingham and Natick, Monday through Friday. I would anticipate that we would see a decent mix of our current ADA riders, but also a large number of the general public. I could imagine members of Framingham State, their community, could be using it. Other members of the general public who want to go out, people who they work a job that gets done. They work at a restaurant, and the fixed routes currently end at about 8 p.m. and the shift gets done at 10. This could be a really good jobs access program for a number of them. It's hard to say, though. This is speculative at this point, but I think that program could have a number of applications. So those are sort of the people we're seeing. It really does vary by the trip generators within the area, how big the area is, and sort of where that organic growth comes from. We obviously want the organic growth everywhere, but sometimes you just find these trip generators, and those are sometimes where the people come from. And I think Wellesley is a great example of higher ed.
Thank you. Josh, do you want to say anything on that?
So thank you, Len. Until a few weeks ago, I was on the advisory board of the Metro West RTA. So just speaking in that capacity, the board was very supportive of efforts to implement and expand Catch Connect, because it really does is a very not sparsely populated, but as the fixed routes really don't serve people as well as needs arise, and the scheduling of the service on nights and weekends is great as a good way to deploy the fleet and workforce, as a complement to the typical fixed route service. I'd say also that Wellesley, Colette in particular, were real leaders in helping to make sure that Wellesley, got a good return on its investment, with the RTA. This was a way for the community to realize the kind of support, the benefit to go along with its appropriation assessment into the RTA. So where I think that in the years to come, we can do better is having the municipalities be better partners in reaching out, particularly to more transit-dependent populations. But that's something that, I've advised our staff in Natick, where I live and was on the board, to just, partner directly, because this is all about partnerships and how you can assure that the people who are going, whatever their destinations may be, that they know that there's good travel options to do that. So Len, did you have me in mind to speak about that particular service, or did you want me to talk about Newton? Because I have different hats that I wear.
I'm interested in Newton.
Yes. Yeah. Sure. So to bring up to date on Newton, from Ethan's presentation, we as I think folks may know, we consider it an operational success, and that we've really been able to design a service that addresses our distributed village, our land use patterns and distributed job centers and residential neighborhoods, and because the MBTA is very constrained in what it can provide for fixed route service. So we were able to put together a small amount of city funding. It's been $275,000 a year since its inception, targeting senior service, and then a small amount of mitigation funding, TDM, and then significant grants, including community transit program and others. We're able to get up to the $1.2 million to $1.6 million with these various grant sources, but in some ways a victim of its own success, because it doesn't really scale so well when you have 8 vehicles instead of 4. You don't have a lot of economies of scale there. So where you do have is some built-in redundancy. So when you do have those excess of or adequate capacity, when there is a trip that goes outside of Newton for medical, only carrying 1 passenger, typically, then you then have those other vehicles to pick up the slack. But when we had to pull back for cost reasons in the summer, September 5th, we saw our unmet rides number on the dashboard spike dramatically. We might have had 20% unmet rides, and then my phone was ringing and other people's phones are ringing because people are not getting the service that we expected. We also made a decision last summer, when we foresaw some of the funding challenges that we were going to have to maintain the service, to do a new procurement, because we wanted to make sure that we were in this very dynamic provider market for rideshare, that we were getting the best available, and that we also were able to structure a new procurement that would focus on the service that we knew we were going to be delivering, the Senior Plus, as we call it. 2/3 of the riders are seniors, and the rest are lower income people with disabilities, more transit dependent. So that we would focus on that, and then ask the vendors, how can you expand to provide to the broader population? We got 3 responses to this, and I want to just respect the process, because we're in the procurement process right now. We just concluded interviews, but we're still doing the technical evaluation. We will, between the planning department, the mayor's office, and the senior services, rank and score the proposals, come to an agreement on the technical solution, and then open the price proposals and see where we're at. But that's so within the coming weeks, we'll have a good sense of what we're going to do next, and are we going to let the current contract run until July 1 or sometime in June, or have early termination. And it may be with the existing vendor, maybe with somebody different. We will see. But the benefit, I think, to this, to the MPO and MassDOT and others, is to sort of taking the temperature of the market right now, and what can we learn about the different alternatives. And I have no doubt that the city will be able to share some of the learning from this process, and with other municipalities or regions that are looking at what are the microtransit options. And those include sort of a conventional microtransit, maybe GoGo, who is they like a layer on top of a rideshare, like Uber. There's just different ways where this can be structured. If you are piggybacking with Uber, then you have the benefit of the wider footprint and other people really doing the administration of it. But you may lose some of that local flavor, that local control that you have. I know the city is very committed to providing the transit-dependent service, but that it's affordability in a time when teachers want to be paid, roads have challenges, all the challenges the municipality has that we all know about. Len, I hope that's helpful to just give you a sense of where we're at, and seeing hands raised. Either I did or didn't. answer.
Yeah, it was helpful. Although I was actually going at a different question, but that's fine for now.
Sorry.
But no problem. I didn't make it clear. I didn't make it clear at all. But you did hint at me that the answers may be forthcoming. When Newton tells us more about what it's learned from his program. So I'm gonna go to Franny. Then AC Fregosa, and then I'd like to hear from Ethan and maybe you, Josh, again about what you all think can be done to set these programs up for success from two perspectives. One, just overall, and the other, if they're getting the funding, under a regime that is under the CMAQ regime, how does that work? Because it seems like we're generating new trips. So Franny.
Could I interrupt for one thing? I have
Sure.
I have a 4 o'clock meeting with other staff. So I have 20 minutes here, then I've got to
yeah, no problem.
Okay,
We're going to be
okay.
done do this section by 3:50 because that's going to be that'll have us 10 minutes behind.
And I'm glad to answer questions offline. So
Sure. Okay. Great. And so Franny?
Okay, I think Anna Christina should go first because she has to leave sooner.
Sure, that's true. Thank you, AC.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you said that. Yes, my question was, I didn't really want to open a can of worms, but listening to this microtransit versions, it seems like it's taken over what taxi cabs used to provide, only it's run by, a more public outfit. So my question was, what happened to taxi cabs? Is Medallion still around? Have you considered a fixed rate meter that, will track the trip, whatever mileage they use, and maybe market yourself as a taxi cab, or is that just foolish and I'm totally misunderstanding?
The city of Newton used to get vouchers from Veterans Taxi, and Veterans Taxi got croaked, as did so many other taxi cabs, by rideshare. In my former role in Natick, where I was on the select board, we also used to have like fixed rate services. That was kind of baked into our budget, and they increasingly went away. There are no more Natick-based taxi companies. So
are there any in the state, or what happened to that Medallion program where you had to like apply to be licensed as a cab driver? That would go away, that requirement, if we do this microtransit level?
I think I think the taxi industry is its last
never coming back
on its last wheels. And that's just
But you could do what you were thinking, AC, using the Uber model, because I think the MBTA its paratransit program piloted that and had some interesting results. Franny.
Yeah, I just want to note that there are taxis being supported by programs from Mass Development and Metropolitan Area Planning Council, and so we're using some in Acton, but we also alternately use them with a service more like a livery service. So I think taxi companies that take on the new technologies are more likely to survive. Okay, I had a couple of questions. One is, are the vehicles that Newton uses from VIA or your own? For Numo.
VIA actually leases cars from Avis. So
okay.
Yeah,
okay.
But they're not city. It's not city fleet. No city employees, and they're all independent contractors. The drivers
are. Okay. The other two questions. One is about whether there's been academic research done on various types of microtransit elements and what works. But I also wanted to just clarify what the definition of microtransit is, because I thought of microtransit as sort of Uber and Lyft type for public vehicles. Something that uses the same kind of technology and it's real-time calling. But then Ethan, in his list of them, seemed to also, and as I've heard other people do, include just shuttles in there. So do we have an agreement in our state what microtransit is? And it's not a good name. I don't know what we should call it. Puber. No, sorry, that was public Uber. That didn't work. Anyway, I was sorry, Josh. This is terrible. I'm gonna be fired. Anyway, so I just don't think it's well named, but I'd love to hear Ethan's comments on how he interfaces with that name problem.
Yeah, so thanks, Franny. I actually have a couple more slides to run through on a couple projects, and we actually do kind of mention that in there. We'll run through them like quickly in a bit.
Okay.
But I don't know, actually, Franny, I can take the other questions at the very end if you want and kind of run through, answer your first question as I talk through these, if that helps.
Yeah, that's great.
All right. And so then, Ethan, is your slides going to deal with what we can do to set these programs up for success?
Yes, so we actually have
Okay.
some discussion prompts and mention that.
Okay, great.
Also say, while I think Stella's getting the slides back up, that one of the things we've run into is I showed 7 shuttles earlier on screen. Almost none of those shuttles are like one another, so we're just jumping kind of the end here with impact on future applications. But the bottom line is that in terms of actually benchmarking shuttles against one another, fixed route, microtransit, even microtransit to microtransit, local context is dictating the services that are getting deployed. And that also makes it very hard to say, take Crosstown Connect and compare it to Numo, or even compare Numo to the Salem Skipper, which is also a VIA operated Numo-esque kind of service. So we also know of other communities like Revere and Chelsea, for example, that are looking into it. North Reading has historically looked into various kinds of microtransit service for different needs. It is microtransit really is an umbrella term. And that umbrella is still covered by the MPO's Community Connections program, even with our recent findings in mind. We do still prefer that our regional transit authorities are the primary operators because they have the ability to gather those metrics, confer with their riders, figure out what is working, what is not working, where those trips would have otherwise been made if they were not available. Because as well, they generally have greater technical capacity. They tend to be able to get the numbers together to say, this shuttle will probably last once the MPO pulls back, because we don't want to string people along for 3 years and provide them with a temporary service that they will no longer have access to on an arbitrary date. We are legally obligated to do so. It's not that we do that out of our own, cruelty, but it's also something we want to keep in mind going forward. Like, we need to set these up for success, and that requires having a good, strong technical understanding, perhaps through the technical assistance that the MPO offers, to do so. The other reality being as well, microtransit is one kind of transit. As Jim mentioned, as Josh mentioned, it can be a Goldilocks. And what that means is that sometimes microtransit may not work, but maybe it's fixed route, maybe it's flex, maybe it's rail, maybe it's walking and biking. There are a variety of different options here, and the Community Connections program funds a lot of those other options too. I think I have a second slide, but I think it's basically just a reiteration of things I've already said there. So I hope that covers. Oh, yeah, that's discussion. And then on the next slide too, we have some prompts in case others are looking at things. But Franny, I know you had other questions too, if you want to kind of ask those. I hope that helped.
No, it was just about what studies. Every once in a while I've seen studies or I've heard about how things are working. Like, for example, I heard, which fit with what Jim said. I remember hearing from the Greater Attleboro region that their observation was that microtransit seemed to work best in low, for under delivering fixed route, and it seemed to work well in slightly lower density regions. So it sounds like that middle area that Jim mentioned is good, not too rural, not too urban. But I like that idea of all these different services interchanging and supporting each other.
So I'll circle back to Josh because I know Josh has to go if he wants to say anything in closing. And then we'll take John and Laura and we'll answer the question in the chat from Sophie.
Yeah. Well, so this has been really educational for me, as well as all of you, to get to be in the driver's seat, to see the data dashboard, to talk to the customers. I am really persuaded that microtransit is an essential part of the future. It could not happen without the support of the MPO and many of the people here. So I'm grateful on behalf of the thousands of people that benefit from it every week. We do a lot of outreach. People are taking trips they would not be able to make otherwise. And sometimes it's people with a disability or lower income or a senior or for socialization. It's all the benefits of public transportation, just delivered in an innovative way. It's going to continue to evolve. We've seen that. I'm really impressed by how much time is spent on this. And I should, I think I mentioned at a Moving Together conference in October when I presented on where we're at with this, that you really need to be committed to it. Like our senior center, senior services coordinator spends like half her time dealing with this, and I spend several hours a week. We were interrupted in this meeting. A guy came in, looking for me. So it's it's a very hands-on. You're in the transportation business if you join this. So, and I'm glad to have further conversations with folks about this, or I know Nicole or others will when we do that. And just a shout out to Ethan for his great
and we need to figure out some way to measure, like reliably measure these benefits, meaning that have more of a qualitative aspect to them than quantitative, so that when it comes to selecting, I make decisions, we have some real basis, to make those decisions, but we'll discuss more, Josh, in some capacity, or we'll discuss about this in some capacity, if it's not with you. John. Oh, he put his hand down. Or is he still here? Still want to talk? Maybe not. Laura?
Sure, thank you. Laura Davis. I'm from Concord on the Transportation Advisory Committee. I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about how fares are set for these microtransit programs, if there are any best practices that have been discovered, whether it works as a free service, et cetera.
So, Ethan, do you want to take that?
Yeah, it's a cop-out, but it varies from town to town. Generally speaking, some communities use fares. Actually, we'll pass it over to Josh because I know he's got a good handle on this, but we have heard historically from the MPO that sometimes our preference at the MPO is no fare, because even though that can make especially demand response like the ideal form of transportation, which can saturate it with demand and kind of make it run worse, that especially when it comes to the funding side, if you rely heavily on farebox revenue to support the funding of your service, if you don't meet your ridership goals, you might not be able to continue the service due to fiscal constraint. So we kind of handle a lot of the finances on this. That's our bias. But at the same time, I know from an operating standpoint, as Josh can probably attest, having a fare can be a good thing.
All right. So we'll go to Jim, because Jim, I think, can give some input on this, and then maybe he can answer Sophie's question about how they're financially supported. I think beyond MPO funding, I think if you have anything to add beyond MPO funding, we'll be interested in that. So Jim?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think Ethan hit the nail on the head, at least for the Metro West experience. The fare is important at this point in time for the MWRTA as a revenue source. Long term, it may not be. Obviously, there's lots of discussions long term about fare-free initiatives. And the MWRTA does have a very low farebox recovery rate, so we are not heavily reliant on farebox revenue for our operations, though we definitely do rely on it to some extent. What I would say is the fare is almost a more important tool to make sure that you limit demand. If you have a unique rider who wants to take 500 trips in a week, that one person could bog down your entire system. By having it not be set to zero, you can help to reduce the demand from an extreme circumstance like that. I think that a fare that is reasonable or small could help that. So more important as a demand limiting tool so that the system doesn't become overrun.
Gotcha. So, John, this is going to be the last comment question. And just so you all know, I have grabbed the 13 minutes, 10 from old business, new business. So that's chucked, and the chair's report. So John.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure.
Is a successful service area pretty much contingent upon having an institutional asset or two, such as an academic or hospital, resource within that area? It seems that that's in play in some of those areas.
So I'm going to do it to you, Ethan, for a short answer.
It helps. Again, kind of a cop out. It helps. A lot of paratransit services do provide those connections to specific discrete healthcare facilities, for example. But that doesn't, especially when it comes to paratransit and medical services, the funding that is necessary from government to contribute, especially from the MPO, is usually insufficient to actually cover the full kind of needs there to provide that. The Royal Street shuttle that I alluded to earlier in Canton is predominantly a point-to-point shuttle that connects people from Route 128, JFK, Quincy Adams, and the Ashmont MBTA stations into an office park in Canton. And the ridership is basically, it is what it is. It doesn't have a lot of growth potential. And as a result, when you only pick one or two locations to go to, you can get yourself tapped out in that way. You kind of need a varied approach. And again, it's local context sensitive. Sometimes one key destination is all you need to drive ridership.
Yeah, I was going not just for the ADA or the patients or students, but also the service people and staff members that are working, let's say, at the those institutions.
Okay, well, that's good to. All right, we'll continue discussion in another meeting. So thank you, everybody. And yes, this is an important topic and it's an interesting one. We will be dealing with it more. Being on also here. So yeah, we'll move on to the next topic, which is the UPWP. Sharika.
I will take my leave. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Right. Thank you, everybody who participated. Sorry, just kind of in a rush to get
no,
to the agenda. All right.
See y'all.
Thanks. Okay. Bye.
Hi, Len, and members of the Advisory Council. I don't have any slides today. I believe we're just continuing discussion from the last meeting on a potential study idea submitted on behalf of the entire Advisory Council. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but I don't have any slides or sort of discussion points at this point.
Okay, that's great. Well, the irony maybe that we'll get all our time back in this segment if people don't have anything to suggest. Hands up if you have something to suggest. Okay. Well, so okay, John.
Okay. This on the UPWP, this is sort of a wild ass thought, but we may be going in the wrong direction, I think, farther out in terms of what our infrastructure needs might be in relation to some of the goals that we've set in terms of climate resiliency, CMAQ, such like, congestion. And I guess to ask a question, why has car usage increased? Why has it grown? Since right now, would it continue to grow? Also, why has congestion grown? Why has the transit and rail not really grown as aside from the rails woes and signals? But are people driving more because of some of the climate, first and last mile? They don't want to walk in the heat. They don't want to walk in the rain. They want to get to their destination and just have it convenient. They've got multiple things in their busy lives that just don't fit a transit schedule, a rail schedule, subway schedule, and you just need to get done point to point. Question being also, if I don't know what our goal is for e-vehicles for personal usage and commercial usage. There's a point at which they're going to be the majority, in which case that's going to be much less of an issue for them being contributors to greenhouse gases. So are we going to get to a point where we're going to need to build more roads versus have more transit?
Right. So let me just say that I think the point of discussion now will be for us to once again continue exploring some ideas. If we want to try to create a study, it's not a whole lot of time, but maybe we could like outline it. Because as you know, we in order for something that we suggest to get serious consideration, it has to be kind of fleshed out. With the rationale, and then and then the study itself, and then what you expect to find. And so if we don't do that today, and we think we will, then hopefully the members will be empowered to do that on their own. And then can present their own study proposal and before the deadline. An alternative is that any number of us below the quorum could also get together and flesh out a study or two that we can submit before the deadline, which is February 1st. I think it's the deadline. I was looking at the UPWP slides, so I think I have that right, Shalika?
Yes, the survey closes February 1st.
Okay, yeah. All right, and then there is a survey too, so that we can all take. So any other feedback from folks? All right, well, I'm always interested in UPWP. From the universe last year, I think I mentioned last time, I haven't gotten to Logan. I am very much interested in the car share study. But I guess I'm not so inclined this time to come up with studies on my own, but to just kind of look at the studies that are proposed. And if when we get presented to the universe, we don't see anything. Let me rephrase this. When we see the universe, I'd see things from the previous universe that I liked more, than perhaps I'll work on trying to combine elements of that, into studies that are in the current universe, meaning the upcoming universe, or see if we can, get a proposal for something that was in a previous universe, into the upcoming universe. Certainly some things that I think are going to come along anyways without us prompting will be the next version or the next future to curb study, and right now I'm not sure what that would be. I'm tempted to put some thought into it, but I'm also kind of counting on those who are closer to it, having a good idea of what one they think should be done next, but more importantly, two, what they think could be done next. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. I'm definitely interested in more thoughts about roadway pricing, and we will hopefully have a presentation on that either later this month if we have a second meeting or at our next meeting. But that one can be a little tricky, and so yeah, I just want to have some discussions with people about that before trying to pursue something like that as either my idea or something that comes from the advisory council. And I would dare say probably anything having to do with resiliency and probably be worth the while. Especially with the news that the Red Line, had delays because of flooding, in the Braintree area, which I don't recall happening before. But then I don't read all the news about the T all the time. So that could very well be a notice that I missed me. But yeah, we got a lot of rain last night and we had some snow. But I think episodes like this are going to be more frequent. And so whatever we can do, to kind of mitigate the effects of that would be worth getting a handle on. So that's it for me on the topic. Um, okay. Well, let me see. Where are we now? I think we may be gaining some time back. Yeah. So, um, last call. All right. Yeah. So, we'll move on. And so, Shalika, thank you very much. And I will see you tomorrow. And and we'll probably see you back here, next month, or certainly in March. All right. But certainly whenever you want to come to a meeting, Shalika, you're always welcome. Just let us know. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And so we'll next move to approval of the minutes.
All right. I think a couple people dropped off, but it looks like we still have a quorum here. So October 11th, 2023, these minutes are posted to the calendar. Does anyone have any questions, requests, or if not, a motion to approve them?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Okay. Second?
I think the vice chair. Yeah, I was going to say, I think the vice chair should always second the minutes. So just as a courtesy second. So thank you. Thank you, Franny.
Okay, so motion having been made and seconded, call the roll. Len Diggins.
Yes.
Franny Osmond.
Yes.
John McQueen.
Yes.
Andy Reeker.
Yes.
And Owen McDonald.
Yes.
All right, great. That carries. Thank you all.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so folks, I'm gonna ask that we consider having a second meeting this month to cover some things that have been discussed at the board meeting I think would be of interest to the group. Two of them are UPW studies have been completed, one by Stephen Andrews, having to deal with flexible bus routes, and the other was the the roadway pricing and study, and so I'd like for us to maybe meet for an hour and a half or so to give a half hour to both of those, and then another 30 minutes to the resiliency section of the needs assessment. And I asked that because my sense is that our February meeting is going to be pretty packed, and I think we just benefit from it. And to sell this a little more, this is a case where we have 5 weeks between our regular meetings. And so it gives us the opportunity, to have a meeting on either 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now, but still get like a couple week break before our next meeting. So I think we would benefit from it. The presentations, that I've seen have been very good. I happen to have seen the presentation for the roadway pricing as by attending the congestion management, meeting. So I think that will generate a lot of interesting discussion. So the deal is this: either we can do it as a group meeting. By that, it's a full committee meaning that we have a quorum and we post it, as an official meeting. Alternatively, we don't have to have a quorum, but we can still post it, and people can attend as they want. In either case, we're not going to have any business that requires voting. We're not going to have minutes, we're not going to make any decisions. And so it really is just an opportunity for us to have a discussion. Yeah, hopefully we'll learn more and be able to give better feedback on the topics. So let me unpull participants so I can see if anyone wants to say anything. So I don't know what the default to here. The default is that we don't do it. The default is always the status quo. And so I I guess if we're going to want to have an official meeting, then we should have a motion and a second for it and vote. Otherwise, it'll just be a meeting, and whoever shows up, and that'll be it. So, John?
I can do the 24th. I think it makes sense to have there's some good issues to be addressed in that second meeting.
All right.
I'm sort of equivocal. So I'll see if I can come. I just have a lot on my plate lately.
I understand. I mean, like I said, we're not going to be voting on anything. And even if we do make it an official meeting, it won't really matter if we don't have a quorum. And I guess my overall concern, and one of the reasons that I'm making this a request, is that I would hate to discuss something at a meeting where no one or most people don't want to come to it. And it isn't even a matter of can't come. It's like they just don't want to come, and then they don't have an opportunity to discuss it because we had a meeting that they didn't want to come to. So that's what I'm trying to avoid here. And all I'll say in addition is that if you aren't able to make it to this meeting and something is discussed and you like to have it discussed at another meeting, we'll still go ahead and have a discussion about it at a future meeting. Right. So Andy?
Yeah, in terms of the topic, I'm supportive of meeting because I think we've as a group have been really interested in kind of, what exactly is going on in these planning studies and how do we, get some input into it. And I think it would be good to hear what you're planning to report on and just kind of being able to think about how we craft whatever feedback we want to give as a body. So it seems like there's a value in meeting. I'm running up to similar time constraints as Franny. Every minute is so full every day. So I will say I'm still not sure whether I can make either the 24th or the 31st, but I would love to be able to meet. And if I can make it, I'll be there. So kind of my 2 cents there.
No, I hear you, Andy. I know, my time machine, it doesn't take me back and forth in time. It generates more time for me, but it's not working very well lately. So it's not generating a whole lot more time, But I'll add this as a hopefully something that boosts your interest is that I'm not intending to do the presentations on them, and so the goal is to bring in, the folks from staff who have reported on the studies to give a presentation and answer questions. So it's going to be qualitatively better on several quantum levels, so and then it'll be recorded. I think whether it be it's an official meeting or not, it'll be recorded, so it'll be a resource, in that way, and so and I'm hoping that there will be more to it, or let me rephrase this. There'll be some repetition of what happened in the board meeting, but hopefully some additional discussion that will complement what happened in the board meeting. But certainly it'll be our time to ask the questions that we want. So, all right, so I'm seeing 3 favorables, and Franny was ambivalent as to whether it's 24th or the 31st. I get the sense that's the case with you too, Andy.
I think I'm probably better on the 24th. I'll just say that. I'm looking at my calendar right now, and there's just a little more slots.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm fine with either date, and so I don't know if Owen is still here and wants to chime in.
Non-committal for either one, really. Possibility, okay. But maybe not.
Okay, fine. So let's get a motion in a second for the 24th. It'll be a quorum, and then we'll just schedule as an official meeting and go from there.
I'll make a motion
for the 24th.
I'll second it too. Oh, I thought you meant to adjourn.
No. This is
to have it on the 24th.
Yeah.
I didn't know we needed a motion. Okay, I'll second it.
Yeah, maybe we don't, but we do it anyway. Stella,
All right, Len Diggins,
yes.
Franny Osmond,
Yes.
John McQueen,
Yes.
Andy Reeker,
Yes.
Owen McDonald.
Yes.
All right,
Great,
that carries.
excellent. Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. And so we have a minute here. I think I'll give that minute back. The chair's report can wait until either the meeting on the 24th or the next meeting. And I don't really have any business. Maybe if someone has some new business that they want to discuss, you got a minute, and then we'll take a motion to adjourn. All right, so let's get that motion to adjourn, and we won't have a roll call on this one.
Move to adjourn.
And I'll second.
Okay, thank you. So on a motion to adjourn by Franny Osmond and a second by Andy Reeker without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. It's a good meeting. Look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks, and then in February.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Thank you.